everybody. So, what is the Christmas gift? Is it presents or someone's presence? So, when someone says the word Christmas, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Presents, family, shopping, stress, or Jesus? Hello, everybody. I am Patty Dorito, and I am the founder and owner of Holistic Healing Atlanta. At Holistic Healing Atlanta, we incorporate healing the body, the mind, and the soul. Through the body, through nutrition, exercise, sleep, de-stressing, and balancing our genetics through holistic methylation. Healing the mind through traditional therapy, and then quantum neuro reset therapy, where we balance the brain and address past traumas that are still affecting us today. And I also do neurofeedback. And spiritual, the soul. Now, each person comes to me with a unique set of issues, and therefore no two protocols are identical. I know personally that when I address the body, the mind, and the soul, I'm a much more balanced, healthy person. So I love getting your emails and feedback and any suggestions. So please send them. If you have any questions during the show, please feel free to post them in the chat box or contact me later. I also sent out a newsletter today, and if you didn't get it and you'd like to, you can contact me, or I don't know. You have to contact me, I guess, to get that, or you can go to my website and get it from there, which is Holistic Healing Atlanta. So what is the season of Advent for? And what are some ways we can go back to the original meaning of Christmas, especially in a material saturated society? You know, shop till you drop. With the pandemic in full swing, we continue to have things taken from us. Don't travel. Don't celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas with your family or friends. Don't go shopping. And the list goes on. I think people are also doing a lot of retail therapy, online shopping. So how do we move forward with so many limitations and find the real meaning of Christmas? This may require us to go and get in touch with our own spirituality. And did you know that there is evidence-backed connection between spirituality and mental health? Spirituality can change the neurochemistry in your brain. A connection to spirituality lights up certain parts of the brain and boosts serotonin. Serotonin is the feel-good neurotransmitter, which also stabilizes our mood. So Advent is a good time to reconnect or to connect with God. So with that, I want to introduce you to a very special returning guest today, Father Michael Bremer. Father Michael was born in Germany, raised overseas for most of his life in a military family. He attended the University of Georgia, go Bulldogs, and went right into seminary afterwards. He was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Atlanta in 2018 and has been serving in the parish of St. Bridget Catholic Church in Johns Creek, Georgia, since 2019. So please welcome Father Michael.
Hey, Patty, thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back on here with you.
Of course. So is there anything else you want to add about yourself? You as a priest is Christmas time. I know it's busy for you.
Yeah, it's when the busy season begins for us. Yeah, but it's all part of the fun.
There you go. So as Christians, we started on Sunday Advent, and that's the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. And so what is the purpose of Advent as a Christian?
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty wonderful opportunity. And so not only just us Catholics practice it. I know some Anglican friends who do, some Presbyterian friends who do as well. But we all instinctively, just part of the culture, it's part of ingrained in us. We understand the importance of Christmas. And so the fun thing about Advent is that we get to take some extra deliberate time to prepare for just a wonderful reality, an event in history.
Cool. So, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the materialism, shop, spend. How do we minimize that? How do you suggest we minimize that? Because there is the reality that we have family and gifts and stuff, but how do we minimize that, not get caught up in it?
Yeah, so we'll get to this here in a little bit. Talking about the birth of Jesus, the fact that God has become man, the fact that God has become flesh. And so we see that material isn't a bad thing, right? But maybe materialism is, right? Maybe putting too much emphasis, maybe to go in one extreme. But I'm a firm believer that if we keep everything in balance, and that's kind of what you're saying in your intro, then things will kind of take care of itself. So one thing, honestly, that really helps me, because even as a priest, materialism can be a temptation, is simply to pray a little bit more. When I find that peace, when I find that joy, when I find that centering, well, then I find myself less tempted to go try and escape through various material things.
Yeah. So, what is our benefit if we prepare for these 4 weeks? So I kind of liken it a little bit to, like, if I was going to put on a party, I would do all the preparation and I would buy things and make it really pretty and then invite people and not just show up or have people show up, because then I'd feel not right. So I kind of like an Advent to that, but I don't know like how you see it. What's our benefit if we do prepare spiritually for Advent?
Yeah, no, I actually really like that image. When I preach this past Sunday, I sort of use a similar kind of thing. It's like when somebody's expecting a baby, normally they'll kind of arrange their house, right? They might make a nursery in there, maybe rearrange some rooms to kind of accommodate the new life in that house. But the fun thing about cleaning your house for guests is that your house gets cleaned. So in a very real way, for us, as we prepare for Advent, as we prepare for the birth of who we believe to be our Savior, our heart actually gets transformed in the process as well. So there's that benefit, and also the actual celebration of Christmas, which we're preparing for. Yeah, we can't help but grow more spiritually. In a particular way, the thing that we're really practicing is the virtue of hope. And it might be strange to kind of think of hope as a virtue, but it's something that needs practice. It's something that needs building, so to speak. So we properly prepare for Christmas and prepare for the wonderful celebration that is, it will give us a sense of peace. So all this entire time that we're preparing, as we try to transform our hearts, allow God to transform our hearts, when we actually arrive at that, we come to recognize with just a little bit more joy in life, then we can kind of look forward, even, dare I say, the end of our lives. That something better will happen.
So how do you define hope? Because it's a little bit, there's different kinds of hope.
I know, it's true.
I hope it gets warm again.
Yeah. But I think, like the instinct is always that it's future oriented, right? Or it's past oriented. Like, I hope that that wonderful thing I did, I hope it kind of transforms, the world. Or I hope that thing that I did that was a mistake doesn't, have too many consequences. So it's either past or future oriented, right? So I hope that I get like a nice slice of pizza or something. But it's the expectation that something good will happen, either from my past or from the future. That's kind of just a broad way to define hope. Yeah.
Because I think that's kind of important for all of us to understand that. So, and then and I kind of alluded to this in the beginning, if we prepare spiritually, where you said too, that it also helps us mentally and physically. As somebody who integrates all of that stuff, I see that when people, it's like that three-legged stool. And if all parts are being activated and working, then we feel more balanced, more at peace. So, and I said, like, there's a lot of science back to spirituality and the feeling good and peace. So how do you see that if you as a priest spiritually, how does that affect people mentally and physically?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. So like exercise science and nutrition is kind of like a little hobby of mine. So a lot of my emails over the past few weeks have been, don't let the holidays ruin your diet, or don't let the holidays ruin your gym time. So Advent can kind of be seen as like returning back to the basics, right? So returning back to this like fundamental fact of Christianity, that God became man. So like with all those emails that I'm getting, not to ruin my diet, not to stop going to the gym, it's a very similar thing, like spiritually, like return back to the basics, right? So just kind of like making sure that these like fundamental aspects of our existence are being taken care of. Well, yeah, then there's a ton of really wonderful benefits that come from that. In a particular way, the fact that God has become a small little baby, there's something simple about that. It was either Da Vinci or Aristotle that said like simplicity is sophistication. So it's just kind of the reminder of like the simple things in life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get carried in the whole season where we skip prayer, skip the gym time, go for fast food, just eat, and then we start feeling all icky inside. Then we start beating ourselves up. I mean, that's what I see in my practice, that people are so hard on themselves, and because there's all this expectations and pressure. So I asked you before we got live, like, what do you see different this year? This is a very unusual holiday, and I use that from Thanksgiving to New Year's is a really hard time for a lot of people. And but how do you see it differently this year?
Yeah. So I mean, like, and it's kind of like what you're hinting at just a second ago. It's like the holiday season can be incredibly painful for a lot of people, probably like mentally, emotionally, um, right? Because like you mentioned, there's a ton of expectations in terms of like the grandeur, the wonder, the awe of the season, but sometimes it just doesn't quite deliver. On top of that, you throw in different family feuds, maybe the loss of a loved one, right? All the different like family dynamics that kind of go on. And it can be an incredibly burdensome season. Then you throw on the wet blanket that COVID has been, right? And this kind of like puts the edge on a lot of these things as well, right? Kind of like what you had mentioned in your intro. Like a lot of things are being taken from us, rightly or wrongly so. It doesn't matter. Just life looks incredibly different. I was speaking to a lot of my people, especially a lot of the elderly. They understood on one hand just like the safety of like not necessarily going with like a lot of their younger families or the people who maybe not be taking all this so seriously. But on the other hand, it's like the loneliness that they feel. So there's like that kind of added tension in people's existence that might not have been there before. You talked about travel, family gatherings. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
So somebody's isolated, and that's really true. I mean, because of the situation, how do they spend time in prayer and preparing for Christmas? Because I don't know, a lot of people when they're feeling down and out or sick or lonely, it's sort of sometimes God gets dropped. It was interesting during when COVID first shut down some things. Some people said, "Oh, I feel so close to God right now," and other people are like, "Where is He?" So I was just wondering, like, for the people who are really struggling to find God in this and in their loneliness, because that's like what Mother Teresa says is the greatest poverty of all, loneliness. So what do you say to people to help them through?
Yeah, and what really stuck out to me in your intro was one of the things like where you're talking about like the different protocols that you might like have a patient undergo. Like no patient is the same. It
Sure.
speaks to the fact of like our loneliness and our suffering are incredibly particular to each and every one of us. But still, what I really love about the title about this is not presence, but presence, right? Because I think probably and I can speak from my own experience, like the most difficult thing about suffering isn't necessarily like the pain in and of itself, but the fact that I might feel lonely in it, right? I might not feel understood. Somebody might not know what I'm going through. So I think Christmas, which is always easier said than done, provides, I think, what maybe one of the most profound images to help us in our loneliness. The fact that there's Almighty God, omnipotent, omniscient, right, all powerful, and God decides to become a baby. um, and so to me, it's kind of paradoxical, but it kind of points to like the littleness of God's love and the fact that He's willing to go in this crazy thing we call the world, willing to enter into it in a very vulnerable and risky kind of way. So that shows to me that God is able to give His presence to me. He's not afraid of my loneliness.
So how would you know that God's present with you?
Yeah. So that does take a little while to cultivate. And I know for me, it took. Hopefully, this doesn't sound intimidating to the viewers. It took a couple years to really nurture the practice of the presence of God. Because again, like hope, the presence of God is something. Yeah, like our faith muscle that we have to strengthen, that we have to flex. Um, but if there's one guarantee of the spiritual life, is that frequent and faithful prayer will make a difference, right? So along with death and taxes, we can be sure about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because, like, personally, and then even in my clients, when people are just feeling the worst, I'll say, "So how are you doing with your your prayer life, your connection to God?" And almost 100% of the time, personally, and for my clients, it's slipped up some, or they're feeling very unlovable because of something in the past that's just weighing on them. So, it's pretty profound because I was with my daughter 2 weeks ago. She had a baby. And, that all of that perfect little baby that didn't have to do anything, just to be lovable. And then I was thinking about why so many people, like everybody, feels unlovable at some time. What has happened to us? What have we chosen to do? What was done to us and like, how do we get back to that simplicity and that perfect, unblemished little baby, doesn't have to do anything to be lovable.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. I've been thinking about that question kind of like for the past couple months. Do you remember the story of Adam and Eve way back in the beginning?
Yeah, I remember Adam and Eve. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it kind of speaks to all of us at some point or another, right? So the tree is symbolic of limit, right? Like we humans are finite, we're limited, right? For example, like I need oxygen to breathe. Um, the fact that I'm a finite being means that I'm here and I can't be over there at the same time, right? So pretty much my entire existence has limits to it. I'm not as funny as another person, right? I'm not as spiritually gifted as another person. And so the issue is, and I'm sure you found this a lot too, at some point those limits in some way become painful to us, even though they're perfectly okay, right? But something happens to us where we start to believe that the limit is a bad thing, right? So when Adam and Eve eat from the tree because they're trying to transcend, they're trying to overcome that limit, all of a sudden something bad actually does happen and they try and hide themselves. Um, and so Christmas is almost the perfect answer for that God would become not hidden, but manifest here in the world. Um, yeah, and so, and this is one of the more profound points I've been thinking about for Christmas. Like, why does God become a baby? Like, why doesn't the Christian God go the Greek mythology route and like thunderbolts from the sky and and like asserting his dominance over humanity? So babies can be threatening in their own way, right? The fact that like there's this like a need, and there's a lot of that we have to they depend on us, and so it invokes a lot of responsibility. But babies are also incredibly unthreatening at the same time too, aren't they?
Yeah.
You're not going to be hurt from a baby. So it's kind of profound that I think God would almost give us like a little peace treaty of saying, "I'm not here to harm you." Right. So I think that's probably one of the things that speaks into sometimes the lie we can believe that, yeah, maybe I am unlovable. But it's like, well, if I look to God, having become a little baby, maybe I'm actually kind of delightful.
Yeah, that's a backwards way of looking at that, like how that this little baby Jesus is not harmful, and that's more approachable because, again, if someone had a tough father or a tough mother, they really have a hard time relating to God the Father, God the Mother, even a brother, Jesus. It's very difficult. So that's a very sweet way um, to be able to turn that backwards.
Yeah. And so one of the prayer practices I have people who I counsel spiritually is I'll tell them like I'll have them read one of the nativity stories, right? So maybe Matthew chapter 2 or Luke chapter 2. So in Matthew's version, it's the wise men that come and visit Jesus with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But in Luke's version, it's the poor little shepherds that go and visit him. By the way, what I have people do is like I have them try and imagine themselves, right? So you have Mary, you have Joseph, and then you have the little baby Jesus. And what I invite them to do is to consider that either Joseph or Mary will hand little baby Jesus to them, right? And so they have to kind of imagine themselves holding the creator of the universe like in their arms. it becomes really profound to recognize that like God in a certain sense would have us take care of him. Yeah, so I mean there's a lot you can do with that, but yeah, it's just a really wonderful reality that we celebrate.
Yeah, I was in Israel 4 or 5 years ago, and we were in the where the nativity was, and we had mass there, and they hand the little baby doll around for people to have that image. It was it was moving, and when you talked about that, I just got goosebumps.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember that. I was also in the Holy Land as well. And we were there in church in Nativity. And we just spent hours just kind of sitting there, just being like, wow, God took on human flesh. That's so wild.
We're the plug to go to the Holy Land. If you've never been, it's life-changing.
It is, yeah.
To see these places where Jesus walked or the apostles walked, or it's very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
It kind of gives like like the level of concreteness anytime you read these stories. Like if you see a sycamore tree for the first time, like when you read the story of Zacchaeus, like I know what kind of tree this guy climbed.
I know, yeah, it's absolutely, yeah. So I was wondering, like, how we can feel lovable and deserving of God's love. You know, like maybe the baby Jesus is pretty harmless, but how do we open our hearts to that? And that's a big thing for a lot of people. They just have a trouble of like opening their hearts. They'll do everything for everybody else, but they don't let God in. They don't let anybody else in, but they don't let people love them on a human level, but they don't let God love them on a spiritual level.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that might be one of the most like fundamental like tensions we undergo as humans, right? Because on one hand, like we can be incredibly safe, but on the other hand, we become incredibly unfulfilled, right? So then we take a risk, and then we find fulfillment, right? But that's an excellent question. Like, how does that actually happen? The one thing I love about the Christian faith is, on one hand, like we try and recognize that God is completely transcendent, that God is completely other, that God is completely unrelatable, because he is the only thing that is a divine substance. Everything else that exists is a finite substance, right? So therefore, he's completely other. But what Christmas shows us is that God is also incredibly concrete and tangible. Because I don't know about you, but the times that I felt loved in my life, people have said, I love you, right? And I felt loved. But I think when someone backed up those words with maybe a nice gesture, or maybe a gift, or maybe a hug, or maybe just spending some quality time, right? All the 5 love languages or whatever. It's when they said that and then backed it up with something concrete and tangible of when I actually felt loved, right? So I remember, just like a few experiences of just going through something incredibly difficult and someone saying, I love you. And then they took the time to sit and listen to me, right? And so in a very real way, I think that's what Christmas is, right? God, prove to me that you love me. Give me something tangible. Give me something concrete to prove that you love me. And so here we have this God that decides to undergo the entire human experience, right? He suffers with us. He laughs with us, right? He cries with us and does all these really wonderful things. So when God becomes human, he doesn't just speak a human language. He speaks all of human existence, human reality. And therefore I can find a friend in the face of that. Again, it does take a little while to nurture, understanding like the gifts that God gives to us and being able to see those. But again, kind of like the fundamental thing about the Christmas is that God becomes real. God becomes tangible to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that feeling lovable is probably the biggest thing that I see. That and loneliness. Those two things are universal across my world, what I see. And it's sad, because if they could just see themselves as God sees them, that they would feel a lot better. Because I said, if you knew that you were all loved by God, it wouldn't matter what anybody said or did to you, because it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I didn't ask you this question before. I didn't give you questions this, but like as a Christian, or even in the Catholic tradition, we have a lot of things that happen during Advent that kind of help us to like stay focused. Starting with the Advent wreath. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the traditions and the different saints along the way. We used to celebrate liturgically when my children were younger, all the different saints and stuff, and we had a lot of fun. But I just think it's important that why we do what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things I love about Christmas is that kind of like gives an entire like framework to the practice of Christianity, right? So for example, if I want to pray, well, I have to do something concrete about it, right? Find a prayer space, arrange that in my home, actually sit down, close my eyes and pray. Also becomes very true with a lot of the stuff in our tradition, right? So we have all these things, right? We don't worship these things, but these things help us kind of engage a deeper reality. So you talked about the Advent wreath, right? We have 4 candles, 3 of them are purple, 1 of them are rose, right? And they symbolize, you have to help me out with this, but hope, peace, joy, and love.
Hope, love, joy, peace.
Okay, yeah, in that order. Yeah. And so like there's a certain focus every single week. And so nurturing these different virtues helps us prepare and open up our hearts to be able to love this person we call the Lord. So there's that. And then you kind of mentioned some saints. So one of the favorites in our household was Saint Nicholas, which I think is yeah, exactly. It's either the 6th or the 8th, but what I always remember, putting out our shoes and getting a bunch of candy. It's we kind of called it like an appetizer for Christmas, like warming up the palate, so to speak. Yeah, and actually, so one of the more I guess traditional ones is actually these things called the O antiphons, and so beginning on the 17th of December, making its way all the way to the 24th. Are these different prophecies in the Hebrew scriptures, kind of foretelling the advent of the coming of Jesus. So, for example, the song "O Come, Emmanuel." Well, there's 7 verses, and each of those or stanzas have these things. So that's kind of like a more like a liturgical kind of tradition. I don't know. Can you think of any other ones?
Well, on the 8th is the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
I will pause, and then there's Saint Lucy.
Saint Lucy, yeah.
With lights and white dress and red sashes for my girls. And then, like, even after Christmas, there's Saint Stephen, the first martyr, the Holy Innocents, all the babies that were slaughtered. And then the Epiphany. We used to have an Epiphany party, and we used to invite friends over. We put a little baby Jesus in the cake, a little plastic one, after it was baked. And then we'd make crowns with glitter everywhere in our house. Yeah, so those are some of them. But I was wondering, like, if somebody wanted to look up the O antiphons, they just Google O antiphons or look up O Come Emmanuel, and they can see it all. Because I think in another real practical way, even like if someone if they didn't even have the 4 candles, just like, okay, this week I'm going to pray about and maybe find out what hope means, what Christian hope means, and just in their prayer life, just have hope. Next week, I'm going to just concentrate on love. What does love mean? How do I access it? Do I have a hard heart or soft heart? How do I just finding little ways? Because I think one of the things that I used to sometimes give talks on all these different traditions and stuff, but people could get overwhelmed trying to do it all. Like, my kids hated the Jesse tree, hated it.
Yeah.
And I thought, one day y'all are going to fight over this. So we didn't do the Jesse tree. It just, they did like St. Nicholas Day. They did like their candy in their shoe. But, just trying to find one thing that they can do and not try to do all of these things.
Yeah, exactly. I try and get people to do Lent the exact same way, like quality over quantity, that whole thing. Yeah.
Right. And, I think sometimes people want to be so rigid, because even in the Catholic tradition, the first 2 weeks are more penitential than like ho-ho-hoing and things like that. But then they take it to the extreme. They're fasting and they're like sleeping on the floor. And I mean, a lot of asceticism, and I'm like, So, yeah. So, how can Christmas, I'm going to take this back to you, like, and it's two parts. Like, how can Christmas season make a difference in our lives, especially with the pandemic?
Yeah. So especially with the pandemic, again, we kind of just go like to the basic reality of human existence, right? Giving thanks for the gift of life, even in the midst of just like crazy turmoil. I think of like all the political, economical, and religious strife, like in Jesus's time, and wonder, well, I guess it's not too much different than what we're going on right now. Granted, I'm not sure if there was a pandemic there in the first, in like the first few years of Jesus' life, um, but I think it kind of puts things into perspective. Um, Again, this fact that for like thousands of years, there were like Adam and Eve, Abraham, Noah, David, like all these wonderful people in the Hebrew scriptures, like God for thousands of years had been telling them, hey, something good is going to happen, and then something good did happen, right? So it kind of almost imposes just like the goodness of God into our existence, like if we do practice Christmas, because much like we're preparing for Jesus' birthday, something good will happen, and then it kind of resonates in our entire reality. One day, COVID is going to be over. And that's like a hope that we can look forward to. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing is really nurturing that virtue of hope, right? It makes a big difference in our life to know that everything one day will be okay.
Yeah, even from more of a psychological, if we surround ourselves with hopeful people or hopeful thoughts or hopeful readings, we'll feel better than if we, surround ourselves with the negativity and the hate and the divisiveness. That's like, I don't watch the news. I know what's going on. I read about it real quick and then I'm like, I'm done, because I know it'll bother me. And so, and like, where are we going to find that hope? Like, maybe I would go to the church to pray, or they'd have a church mission. I love that our church mission at St. Bridget is virtual and I can watch it at my convenience. It's coming to me on my TV. But it's just, I think it's harder because the things that I normally would lean on aren't there. I can't do, I can't do what I would normally want to do. So it's a little bit, I think, just for the audience too, like, if we can't do that, it's like, when I went to the Holy Land, I went with Father Jacques Philippe, and he told me, pray as you can, not as you can't, which that's not an original thought, but because I was struggling spiritually when I was there. And he just said, well, pray as you can, not as you can't. So it's like, celebrate Christmas and joy and hope and peace as you can, not as you can.
Yeah, because I think it's probably like one of the big kind of like points of like, the therapy that you give, right? You currently are where you are, and there's a certain level of peace that has to be attained in order to kind of move forward, right? So I know that that's like one of the big things for the holiday season for a lot of people. It's like, it's okay to have a crummy day, and like the peace that comes with just kind of like surrendering that fact will kind of make somebody's day better, right? Um, yeah, yeah.
So the other thing that I was just thinking about is, like, I try to each Christmas thing. We have a little creche with a little baby Jesus on our kitchen table. And I try to think, like, what gift do I want to give Jesus this year?
Ooh.
And so, and maybe a challenge of that. So it might be my judgments, put that out there with the baby Jesus, or that I'm going to speak well of people, or that so I would just sort of, I don't know what you think about doing something like that, to giving baby Jesus a gift.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's fantastic. And that's kind of what Epiphany is all about, right? So from Matthew's gospel, like the three wise men come bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Um, so I think the Hebrew there is actually more reminiscent of time, talent, and treasure. I actually just made that up, but it kind of get like the Epiphany kind of gets at that reality, the fact that like we can give God something, and it can be something a little bit more abstract, like not something a little bit more immaterial, like being more kinder to others, maybe being more kind to myself, or maybe in a more like kind of like material way of like maybe going down, right, it's getting cold, and maybe serving the homeless or serving the poor. Because did St. Francis say it right in giving that we receive, something along those lines? Yeah, and so there should be something like that's really nurturing whenever we do give. And so yeah, I think it's a wonderful question to consider.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you do it at Christmas, you're going to beat the wise men.
that's true. That's true.
I get first dibs on Jesus. And
Yeah.
So going back to like the original, like, the Christmas gift, what is the gift? What are we looking for? Are we looking for presents, or are we going to find presents? And like, what are we concretely going to be doing to make that happen? So I don't know if you have any final words to wrap up, words of wisdom, with the audience, and then with Advent, pandemic, life, stress, expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and so I think it's just like a legitimate kind of thing to acknowledge that the holidays can be really tough. They really can. Um, right, for us priests it's going to be a little bit different. So yeah, we have a ton of masses on Christmas Eve and Christmas, right? So and then on Saturday and Sunday, right, we have our normal kind of schedule, and so like I might not be able to see my family until like that Monday. So like it's a very real thing that yeah, that these days can be tough. But again, kind of like just like the beauty of like the genius of God to come to us as a little baby human is kind of like setting us forth that the ideal is that His love can be concrete, His love can become incarnate to us in our lives. Again, it takes a lot of practice to really nurture that and to really achieve that. Um, yeah, but you talk about expectations, right? Because there's nothing wrong with going out and buying gifts for people so long as if it's done out of love. But I think maybe like the instinct might be to try and earn somebody else's love or something like that, and you just kind of feed into just like negative cycles just within us. So gift giving isn't inherently bad; it can actually be a really good thing, right? Spending time with loved ones, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a cliche by now, but we call the reason for the season. But it's so true. It's so true. Um, yeah, and kind of like just a little closing thought, right? So maybe you're a viewer, you kind of seeing this priest and Dr. Patty talk about the wonderful things that God does even in the midst of life's craziness. I think it's a legitimate expectation to hold God to. It's a little bit audacious to say, look, be more concrete in my life. But also like just like the fair warning, be careful what you pray for. Christmas really is a season of hope because it shows that God's not reluctant, He's not hesitant to be literally conceived and born into our crazy, messy human situation.
Yeah, well, thank you. I would just say you just be gentle with yourself. If you're going to give yourself a gift, it's that gentleness, because people just are so hard on themselves. And I would say, like, be curious about yourself, but don't judge yourself. And I just think that, if, people, and I love if people journal, if they just say, like, I wonder why I'm feeling this way, and just write it. And then, and that could be a gift to Jesus as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're wrapping up, and is for some people, if the season is way more than you can handle, then you can, in your journaling and your exercise and your eating well, sometimes we need outside help. So feel free to reach out to me, Patty Dorito at Holistic Healing Atlanta. You can find me on my website or my email, which is, if you can spell my last name, Patty Dorito LPC at gmail.com. And then maybe what you can do is post your favorite Christmas tradition in the comments section. I'd love to see what people have to say on that. So thank you, Father Michael, and I appreciate it. And happy Advent.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.